So I never thought I'd become that guy. The one who dotes over his roommate like a nervous parent, fussing over every sneeze and sniffle like it's the end of the world. But here I am, knee-deep in chicken soup, extra blankets, and questionable thermometers, watching my roommate turn into a human embodiment of a sad puppy. And honestly, it's kind of messing with me. Let me back up a bit. My name's Ryan, and I live in a cramped but cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I moved in with this guy, Daniel, about 6 months ago. We met through a mutual friend at a bar, hit it off immediately, and then the whole let's split rent and pretend we're adults thing happened. Daniel's a graphic designer, quiet but with this subtle, dry humor that sneaks up on you. He's the kind of guy who looks like he's always lost in thought, but he notices the little stuff. Like when you're down or when your favorite coffee shop has that weird new pastry that's actually decent. Anyway, last Friday was when things flipped. Daniel came home looking like death warmed over. Pale face, hood up, eyes half shut like he was auditioning for some zombie movie. He'd barely managed to grunt when I asked what was wrong before collapsing onto the couch. Usually he's the type to shrug off being sick, but this was different. He was genuinely wiped out. At first I just figured it was a bad cold, maybe something he picked up at the coffee shop down the street where he spends way too much time. But by Saturday, it was clear this wasn't your run-of-the-mill sniffle. Daniel was out of commission, stuck in bed, groaning every time he moved, and completely unreachable except for weak nods when I brought him water or meds. Now here's where it gets weird. Normally, I keep a pretty hands-off attitude with roommates. You do your thing, I do mine, we share a fridge, and maybe some laughs. But seeing Daniel like that, it stirred something in me, this almost instinctive urge to take care of him. I started making soup from scratch, the kind my mom used to make when I was sick. Nothing fancy, but it had that weirdly comforting effect. I ran out to get more tissues, set up a little medicine station next to his bed, even wiped his forehead a couple of times when the fever kicked in. And here's the kicker. The more I cared for him, the more I realized how much I actually liked doing it. Not just because he was my roommate or because he was vulnerable, but because I cared about him. Like, honestly cared. It dawned on me that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about nurse duties, but something deeper. Something I hadn't quite admitted even to myself. But I didn't say any of this out loud. I just kept playing the role of the attentive roommate, making sure he was comfortable, feeding him those questionable spoonfuls of medicine, and laughing when he mumbled complaints between sneezes. The thing is, Daniel started looking at me differently too. Like he wasn't just seeing me as the guy who shares the rent, but someone he could lean on. And then, just as I was starting to think this whole thing might be the beginning of something happened that made me freeze. Something that made me question if I'd crossed a line, or if maybe he felt the same way. But that's getting ahead of myself. For now, all you need to know is that my roommate got sick, and I took care of him. Maybe a little too well. And that's when everything started to change between us. It all started Sunday evening. Daniel was lying in bed, wrapped in what looked like 4 blankets, eyes half-lidded, looking like he might drift off any second. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, a bowl of soup in my hand, trying to convince him to eat something. He gave me that tired, skeptical look he always does when I try to serve food he hasn't prepared himself. "Ryan, this looks like baby food," he groaned, voice hoarse. "Yeah, well, baby food has more nutritional value than the ramen you usually live on." I shot back with a grin. Then, softer, "Please just eat it. You need something, man." He sighed but took a small spoonful, winced, and then nodded. I tried not to read too much into that, but honestly, every little sign of him getting better felt like a tiny win. After he ate, I helped him prop up some pillows so he wasn't just flat on his back. He sort of leaned against me, not in a deliberate way, but more like he was too tired to hold himself up. It caught me off guard. The warmth of his head grazing my arm, the faint smell of his shampoo, mixed with that unmistakable hospital blanket scent from the meds. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could manage was, "You're gonna be okay." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Gratefulness? Maybe something more? He blinked quickly and turned his face away, pulling the blanket up to his chin like it was a shield. I swallowed hard and told myself to just chill. He was sick. He He wasn't exactly in a state to decode emotional signals, but something inside me wouldn't let go. That night, I stayed up later than usual, sitting in the living room with the lights dimmed, scrolling through my phone but not really seeing anything. Every so often, I'd peek into his room. He'd shiver, then settle, and then shiver again. At one point, I grabbed an extra blanket and quietly went in to tuck it over him more snugly. His eyes fluttered open, and he mumbled a, "Thanks." I nudged the blanket down and caught a glimpse of his bare arm, pale and clammy. It hit me. This wasn't just about being a good roommate. I was worried about him. Like, really worried. It was both unnerving and kind of beautiful how fragile he looked. The next day, Daniel was still out of it, but I could tell he was trying to rally. I suggested he see a doctor, and after some back and forth, he finally agreed. I went with him, which felt strangely protective, almost like I was a designated driver for his health. Sitting in the waiting room, watching him try to read a magazine but looking too tired to care, I felt an urge to reach over and hold his hand. Of course I didn't, but just the thought surprised me. The doctor confirmed it was a nasty flu, nothing permanent but enough to make him miserable for a while. I insisted on picking up his meds and some extra groceries on the way home, treating the whole thing like a mission. Back at the apartment, I set up a little sick station on the kitchen counter. Meds, tea bags, tissues, and a note I'd scribbled that said, "Hang in there." Daniel saw it and laughed quietly, which felt like a small, precious victory. Over the next few days, I fell into this weird rhythm of taking care of him. I'd bring him food, check his temperature, remind him to drink water, even if it felt borderline annoying to him at times. He hated being babied, and I got that, but I wasn't about to back off. It felt natural. One afternoon, I caught him watching me from the couch. He was wrapped in a blanket, hair messy, but his eyes were sharper than they'd been in days. "You're really good at this," he said, voice raspy but sincere. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. I've always been a nurturing type, I joked, but then I added, someone's got to do it. He smiled, a small, genuine one, not the sarcastic grin he usually wears. "Thanks, Ryan." Seriously, that moment stuck with me because, for once, the walls between us felt a little less rigid. We were just two guys in a messy apartment, one of us sick, and the other trying not to freak out about how much he cared. That night, I was in the kitchen making tea when Daniel came in, looking more steady on his feet. He leaned against the counter across from me, and there was a softness in his gaze that made my heart do this weird flutter. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I replied. There was this awkward silence, the kind that feels electric, but you're too scared to touch it. Then he cleared his throat and said, "Look, I know I've been kind of a pain with all this sick stuff. Thanks for putting up with me." I laughed. "You're not a pain." Maybe a little, but totally worth it." He smirked, then for a beat, he just looked at me. His expression softened, and I swear I could see something like hesitation mixed with hope. Before I could overthink it, I said, "If you want, I could come build a pillow fort or something. Keep you entertained while you're stuck in bed." He chuckled. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I'm your ridiculous nurse now. Deal with it." He nodded, eyes glinting. "Deal." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just about being sick and taking care of someone anymore. There was something else simmering under the surface, something we hadn't named yet but both felt. I didn't know how far it would go, or if it was just one of those fleeting moments. But I did know I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. So that night we actually built the pillow fort. It was ridiculous, kind of like something you'd expect from 10-year-olds, but with two grown men and a mountain of pillows and blankets. Honestly, it was probably the most fun I'd had in a while. Daniel was surprisingly into it, directing the little construction like a tiny general, and even though he was still weak, there was this spark in his eyes that made the whole apartment feel a little less heavy. We ended up sprawled inside, the soft glow of my laptop casting shadows on the walls as we binge-watched old sitcom episodes. Daniel leaned against me at some point, resting his head on my shoulder. It wasn't awkward. If anything, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I didn't move away. I didn't say anything. I just let it be. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a sore throat. Guess that's what happens when you nap on a pillow fortress floor. When I stumbled into the kitchen, Daniel was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee cradled in his hands. For the first time in days, he looked more like himself, less pale, a little more energetic. "Morning," he said, his voice still a little scratchy but steadier. "Morning," I replied, trying not to sound like I was still half asleep. He smiled and held out a mug to me. Clearly, he'd made some coffee, and maybe he was trying to show me he was on the mend. I took it, feeling a little giddy over the smallest thing. I caught myself thinking, this is what caring for someone feels like. Not the gross stuff, the sneezes, the endless laundry, but the quiet moments, the little shared routines. That day, Daniel insisted on making dinner. "I'm not a total vegetable yet," he said with a smirk, wielding a spatula like he was auditioning for MasterChef. I played sous chef, chopping veggies and cracking jokes the way I always do when I'm trying to mask how nervous I get around him. We cooked together, laughter filling the cramped kitchen, and it struck me how much I was enjoying just being near him. Talking, teasing, sharing little looks that lingered a bit too long. After dinner, we moved back to the living room. Daniel curled up on the couch, and I sat close enough that our knees touched. The air between us was charged but easy, like we were on the edge of something but not quite sure how to cross the line. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel turned to me. "Hey, Ryan, thanks for everything the past few days." I shrugged, trying not to let my heart speed up. "You don't have to thank me. You'd do the same for me." He laughed softly. "Would I? I don't know if I'm that good of a nurse," I grinned. "Oh, come on. I was deadly sick once and ended up taking care of myself." "You're way better." He smiled, and I swear for a moment, the world shrunk to just the two of us, close enough to hear each other's breathing. It was then that Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. "It's my brother. Guess they're worried." I nodded. "You want me to stay around?" He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, actually. I don't think I'm ready to be alone yet." We settled in, and at some point, the conversation drifted to more personal stuff. Family, old crushes, embarrassing stories. I shared a few about my high school years, how I had no idea what I was doing, and Daniel laughed so hard his eyes watered. The sound was like music, and I found myself wanting to hear more, wanting to be the reason he laughed like that. Later, as I got up to grab another blanket, Daniel reached out and caught my wrist. "Hey," he said softly. I froze, heart thudding. "I don't want this to be weird," he added quickly. "But I like you. Like, not just roommate-like. Like," he trailed off, cheeks flushing. I swallowed and squeezed his hand. "Me too." He smiled, relief flooding his face. That night, we didn't do anything dramatic or overly romantic. No grand gestures, no confessions shouted into the night. Just this quiet understanding, a new kind of closeness built on vulnerability and care. In the weeks that followed, Daniel got better, but our relationship changed in ways I hadn't expected. We became inseparable. Not just roommates or friends, but something more. I learned about his dreams, his fears, the way he bites his lip when he's concentrating. He learned about my awkwardness, my bad jokes, and how I obsess over my plants. Taking care of him when he was sick had been the spark, but what kept the fire going was the connection we built after the fever broke. Looking back, I guess getting sick was the best thing that ever happened to us, because it forced us to slow down, to see each other in a new light. And maybe, just maybe, it gave us a chance to start something real. The days after that felt like stepping into a new world, one where the unspoken had finally found its voice between us. We didn't rush anything. No dramatic declarations, no sudden changes in how we acted around each other, but everything shifted in subtle ways. Like when Daniel would brush his hand against mine as we both reached for the remote, or when I found myself lingering in the kitchen just to catch a glimpse of his smile as he made coffee. One weekend, a few weeks after he got better, I suggested we take a break from the apartment and head out to the nearby park. The idea was simple: fresh air, some sunshine, and maybe a chance to just be us without the weight of sick days or work deadlines hanging overhead. We packed a couple of sandwiches and a flask of tea, and somewhere between the city noise and the soft rustling of leaves, I caught Daniel watching me with this quiet intensity that made my stomach twist. We found a spot under a big oak tree, sprawled out on a blanket like we'd been doing this forever. I never thought I'd say this, but I kind of miss being sick. Daniel joked, nudging me with his elbow. I laughed, shaking my head. Yeah? What, the endless attention? The pity? Maybe, he shrugged. But also, it got us here, didn't it? Like, I don't think I would have told you half the stuff I did if I wasn't so miserable. I nodded. Funny how getting knocked down can make you open up. We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. Our favorite movies, the weirdest restaurants we'd tried, the things we wished we were better at. At one point, Daniel reached for my hand, weaving his fingers between mine, and I didn't pull away. It felt natural, like a wordless promise that we were in this together. A few days later, something else happened that threw me off balance. We were watching a movie at home, lying side by side on the couch, when Daniel shifted, resting his head on my chest. I froze for a second, heart pounding so loud I thought he might hear it. Then, slowly, I wrapped my arm around him. "Ryan," he murmured, eyes closed. "I think I'm falling for you." My chest tightened. I wanted to say a million things. How I'd felt the same way for weeks. How scared and excited I was. But all I could manage was to pull him a little closer and whisper, "Me too." From that moment, everything felt different. We started spending more time together, cooking dinners that were actually edible, going for walks around the neighborhood, and just being with each other without the awkward roommate barrier. I'd catch him glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, and I found myself doing the same. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker on. Daniel leaned in, and I met him halfway, our lips brushing in a soft, tentative kiss that sent a thrill through me. It wasn't some perfect movie scene. It was messy and a little clumsy, but it was ours. After that, we started officially dating, though we never felt the need to announce it to the world. Our friendship had blossomed into something deeper, built on trust, care, and those quiet moments we shared when the world faded away. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. A few weeks into our new relationship, Daniel got an unexpected call from his ex. It was abrupt and awkward, and I could see the tension ripple through him, even if he tried to play it cool. I didn't say much, just waited until he was ready to talk. "Hey," he said one night, voice low, "I need to be honest with you." She reached out, and it stirred up some stuff. "I'm not over everything yet." I swallowed, trying not to let my insecurities get the best of me. "Okay, thanks for telling me." "I just don't want to mess this up with you," he added quickly. "You're important to me." That shook me in a way I didn't expect. I wanted to be the guy who said, "I trust you, no worries." But inside, the thought of losing him felt like a punch to the gut. So I did what I do best. I tried to be patient and understanding. We talked more, shared our fears, and slowly navigated the messy parts of love that no one ever talks about. One night, after a long conversation about everything we were feeling, Daniel took my hand and said, "I'm choosing you. I want to be with you." I squeezed his hand back, relief washing over me. I'm choosing you too. It wasn't magic or perfection. It was two people figuring out how to hold onto each other despite the cracks and scars. Looking back, I realized that taking care of Daniel when he was sick was more than just about soup and medicine. It was about opening the door to something real and messy and wonderful. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. After that night when Daniel said, "I'm choosing you," everything felt like it was on this delicate balance, exciting and terrifying all at once. We were stepping into new territory, and though it was thrilling, I couldn't help but feel a little anxious underneath it all. I mean, this was new for both of us, and neither of us had a playbook on how to do it perfectly. One afternoon, a few days after our talk, I was sitting on the couch working on some freelance projects when Daniel came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of tea. He settled next to me, handing me a cup, and for a second it was just quiet, peaceful. Then he looked up at me with that little smirk of his. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd say this, But I'm really glad you got sick. I choked on my tea, laughing. Wait, what? Are you saying you liked being sick just because it got me to take care of you? Not exactly, he said, nudging me gently. More like, it broke the ice, you know? We never would have gotten this close otherwise. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Yeah, I guess sometimes it takes getting knocked down to realize who's really there for you. He smiled and then, out of nowhere, leaned in and kissed me, soft and slow, like he was savoring the moment. I melted into it, all those nervous jitters settling into something calm and right. But as much as I wanted things to be easy, the world had other plans. A week later, Daniel's work started ramping up. Deadlines, late nights, the kind of stress that makes even the strongest people retreat into themselves. I noticed him pulling away a bit, texting less, even skipping our morning coffee ritual. One evening, I found him in the living room, staring at his laptop with tired eyes. I sat down beside him and hesitated before saying, "Hey, you've been kind of distant lately. Everything okay?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Work's been a nightmare. I'm worried I'm letting you down." I shook my head quickly. "Don't say that. You're not letting me down. If anything, I want to be here for you like you were for me." He looked at me, vulnerability flickering in his gaze. "I know. It's just hard sometimes. I don't want to burden you." "Burden?" I repeated, surprised. "Dude, we're in this together. That's what this is about." He smiled softly, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "Thanks, Ryan. I needed to hear that." That night, we talked for hours about work stress, fears, hopes, and how to navigate all the new feelings between us. It wasn't always easy, but it felt honest, and that made all the difference. A few days later, I decided to surprise Daniel with a little break night. I cooked his favorite meal, well, as close as I could get without setting off the smoke alarm, and set up the living room with fairy lights and candles. When he walked in, exhausted from the day, his face lit up in a way that made me smile from ear to ear. "This is amazing," he said, pulling me into a hug. We ate, laughed, and then curled up on the couch, the kind of quiet contentment that feels rare and precious. At one point, Daniel rested his head on my shoulder again, and I held him close, silently promising I'd always be there, through the sick days, the stress, and whatever else life threw our way. But just as I was starting to believe things were settling into a good rhythm, something unexpected happened. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel got a call that shook everything up. It was from his old job, the company he'd left abruptly a few months before. They wanted to offer him a new position, a promotion even, but it meant moving to another city. I watched the conflict play across his face, the excitement, the hesitation, the obvious weighing of his options. Later, when we were alone, he turned to me and said, "Ryan, I don't know what to do. This could be a huge opportunity, but it would mean leaving everything here." I felt my stomach drop. The thought of him moving away, leaving our apartment and our life together, was terrifying. But I tried to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" I asked. He looked at me, eyes earnest. "I want to be with you, that's for sure, but I'm scared of messing all this up." I reached out and took his hand. "We're not perfect. We don't have a script to follow. But whatever happens, we figure it out. Together." He smiled, a little of the tension easing. "Together," he echoed. That week, we talked more than ever, about the future, about fears, about what together really meant. We made no rash decisions. Instead, we promised to be honest, to support each other no matter what. One night, after a long day, Daniel looked at me and said, "You know, all this started because I got sick and you took care of me. I never thought that would turn into something like this." I grinned. "Me neither, but I'm glad it did." He leaned in and kissed me, softer and more sure than ever. "Me too." And as I held him close, I knew that no matter where life took us, this, us, was worth every messy, beautiful moment. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between hope and uncertainty, excitement and fear. Daniel and I spent hours talking about what a move might mean, not just for him, but for us. The idea of starting fresh in a new city was thrilling, but it also meant uprooting everything we'd built, everything that had started with that awful flu and turned into something real. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves sitting on the floor of our living room, the space around us cluttered with half-packed boxes and takeout containers from a lazy dinner. Daniel had his laptop open, scrolling through job listings and apartment ads in this new city, while I watched him, heart heavy but trying to stay supportive. "Do you think we're rushing this?" I asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. He looked up, eyes tired but sincere. "I don't know. I feel like I can't pass up this opportunity, but I also don't want to lose what we have." I nodded slowly. Neither of us wants that. But maybe the answer isn't about where we live. It's about how we face it. Together. He smiled, the kind that reaches his eyes and makes you believe everything will be okay. "Together," he repeated, like a promise to himself as much as to me. That night, as we lay tangled in our sheets, I felt the weight of the future settle over us. It was scary, but beneath that fear was this undeniable pull towards something stronger than either of us had expected. Over the next week, we started making plans, visiting the new city for a weekend, researching neighborhoods, talking to people who'd made similar moves. It was both exciting and overwhelming, but doing it together made it feel manageable. One evening, after a long day of apartment hunting, we ended up at a small cafe, sitting close in a booth with mugs of coffee between us. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I want you in it." My throat tightened. "I want that too." We sat like that for a while, hands intertwined, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. But as the day of the move got closer, I started to notice something shifting in Daniel. He became quieter, more withdrawn, like he was carrying a weight he wasn't ready to share. One night, after I'd fallen asleep, I woke to find him sitting on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. I slipped out to join him, wrapping my arms around his shoulders from behind. "Hey," I whispered. He leaned into me, sighing. "I'm scared, Ryan. What if this move changes everything? What if I'm not the same guy you fell for?" I tightened my hold. "People change, but that doesn't mean we have to lose what we have. We'll learn, grow, and figure it out together." He turned to look at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you for being here, for choosing me." I kissed his forehead, feeling a deep sense of connection. Always. The day we packed up the last of our things, the apartment felt emptier than ever. But when we locked the door behind us, keys in hand, I knew we weren't just leaving a place. We were stepping into a new chapter, one we'd write together. On the train to the new city, Daniel rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt a calm settle over me. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. It wasn't just about the illness that had brought us together anymore. It was about the care, the love, and the bravery to take a chance on something real. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where it took us. Settling into the new place wasn't easy. New routines, unfamiliar streets, and the constant background hum of change. But Daniel and I took it one day at a time, leaning on each other when things felt overwhelming. Some nights we'd sit on the tiny balcony, sharing cheap takeout and talking about the small victories, finding a decent grocery store, figuring out the subway, even discovering a coffee shop with the best chai latte either of us had tasted. One evening, not long after we'd moved in, Daniel and I were curled up on our secondhand couch, the kind that creaked when you shifted, watching an old movie. The apartment was still full of boxes, but it was starting to feel like home. His hand found mine, fingers weaving together like a quiet reassurance. "I was scared we'd lose each other when we moved," he said softly. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me too. But here we are." He looked at me with a warmth that made my chest tighten. "Thanks for choosing me. For sticking it out through the flu, the stress, the chaos. For being you." I chuckled, a little embarrassed, but honestly touched. "I guess taking care of you turned out better than I expected." He laughed, then rested his head on my shoulder. In that moment, the soft light, the easy silence, the feeling of being exactly where we were meant to be, I realized how much had changed since those first sick days. What started as me nursing a roommate back to health had grown into something neither of us could have predicted. A quiet love built on trust, small gestures, and honest conversations. We weren't perfect, and life wasn't a fairy tale. We had our doubts and our fears, but we had each other, and sometimes that's more than enough. As I looked around our new apartment, messy and imperfect but ours, I felt a deep, steady kind of happiness. Not the flashy whirlwind kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you're home, not just in a place, but with a person. Daniel shifted, looking up at me with a smile. Ready for whatever comes next? I nodded, leaning in to kiss him. Soft, simple, full of everything words couldn't say. Always, I whispered, and that was enough.